netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman.
Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello, everyone. How are you? It is Monday, October 12th, 2020. Time for another show. And same things are happening that are usually happening. Donald Trump purports to be president. This is still happening. I don't know whether it was ever really true, but it is still happening. Greg Dworkin is getting set to join us. This, too, is happening, as always, and we're excited about that. And I've got to turn down the little sound effects on my computer so that it doesn't make a little whoop noise every time for all of you when he sends his stories on to me. But it's an exciting noise for me because it means that all the good stories are getting lined up and ready to go. COVID-19 still in wide circulation in the United States, embarrassingly so, and growing as quickly as ever, if not more quickly than ever. We're ramping back up, I guess, for the winter. Interesting that, Trump spent an awful lot of time during the late winter and early spring promising everybody that the coronavirus would disappear in the warm weather. And as it turns out, there was enough of a respite from its spread because the weather was good enough for a lot of us to spend our time outdoors that it held numbers in check to some extent. But since we weren't doing any of the other mitigation steps, universal masking, just generally not being careful enough with our reopening and getting together in large numbers, we continued to pass it around, and now we're back to indoor season coming up. I guess my stock tip to you back in the spring would have been buy stock in manufacturers, retailers, and suppliers of outdoor propane heaters for the restaurant industry. But I probably would have, in the early spring, have thought, well, it's not really likely to be a problem still in fall and early winter, is it? But it quickly became obvious that it would be. And so I would have added that to my stock recommendations in case you had any disposable income, which, by the way, if you do, I have a few suggestions about where you might send some of it. Including me, yes, sure. But lots of political races around the country that could still use some late money, I am sure, to try and put some of their races away or put them over the top in close ones. And, of course, our good friends here at Netroots Radio who need your support as well. But that's not what I'm here to tell you at the moment. It's just kind of, I was reflecting on it a little bit this morning, just where we stand in all of this. I guess, those stock tips, right. I was thinking Logitech and the people who make the webcams that we all need to work remotely and be able to work over Zoom in case you don't have one built in to say into your, most laptops have the cameras built in. But if you're not working on a laptop, or whatever. So things like that, the little nice little speakers, little cameras. I thought for a while we might have a meat supply problem, but we decided to just sacrifice all the workers who work on meat packing and say, let them get COVID. And if they live, great, they'll have a couple months of immunity and they can keep working. And if they die, we'll just get somebody else. We got to keep meat on the shelves. And so it didn't really blow up for the Beyond Meat people the way I thought it might, which is good news, I guess, in that the supply chain didn't collapse. So, economically speaking, that's probably a pretty good thing for a lot of other jobs and suppliers and retailers, unless, of course, you're a strict moral vegetarian or vegan, in which case it's an outrage. So, anyway, and I thought that sector could use a little bit of investment. It was just a thought I had because it wasn't like I had disposable income sitting around that I said, I'm definitely going to buy in and put my money where my mouth. I did put my money where my mouth was. My mouth was here. There was no money. So, technically you can't say it wasn't where my mouth was. It just, there was no way to really demonstrate it. Anyway, I guess speaking of that, I want to thank a lot of people who joined in with my call for backing the show as we separate and head off in our own direction. Lots of people responding to the call. My intention, of course, well, I don't mind that that you didn't follow this advice. My intention was that everybody let everybody finish up the campaign season and donate their money where it's most needed for some of the close campaigns. But I assume that there are plenty of people out there who have income enough to be able to distribute it more evenly on things like this. This helps with the elections too. So I very much appreciate it, and there's some great suggestions about how I might call everybody out and mention their generosity. And I guess at some point soon I'll have to plan this out, because I should go all the way back and talk about the people who've been supporting the show from the very beginning. Then I don't know, or maybe I don't want to do it chronologically, or and add any additional weirdness to it. I don't know. Maybe I should do it alphabetically. I don't know. I'll have to plan out how I can do it. But I want to thank everybody who at least had us in their thoughts. I mean, that's really all I was asking for at the moment. But we've done very nicely in terms of trying to make up some of the deficit that will arise when our separation really sinks in, our separation from the Daily Kos umbrella. Lots of folks stepping up very nicely. A lot of people increasing the donations they already were giving, which is fantastic. Lots of you joining in for the first time. So it's been great. And I don't know, I guess I should also put up a goal or something. But it was in a very nice start, and I appreciate it. And it makes it possible to think about the show going forward well into the future, and that's nice. I'll give you a better update on exactly where we stand and start thanking everybody who pitched in when I have a good plan in front of me for doing that. Right now, I just have some great ideas and probably some great plans suggested in my email and notes that I've gotten from all of you folks ready to go. But no execution over the weekend, as we were still squaring away lots of personal business unrelated to this. It's a busy world out there, and much to catch up on. As a matter of fact, here comes Greg to help us do it. Might as well. This is as good a time as any to jump into it. I'll just say this before we begin, Greg. The biggest story of the weekend that I didn't actually read because so much was going on and just put away for analysis later in the week is the New York Times continues on their investigation and their revelations about what they're learning from Trump's tax returns and about how much money, one, he was cheating the government out of by not paying his taxes with various schemes of varying levels of questionability, plus also now a big focus on the emoluments side and how much money he's extracting from so many others who have interests with the government and are basically investing in the corruption of the government. Let's spend some, I think you all know the story basically. We'll spend a bunch of money at Mar-a-Lago or the hotel. Word will get back to Trump how much money we're spending at his business and how much he's able to pocket as a result of our spending. And then when we lobby him for a big government benefit of some kind, we'll get it and we'll make our money back 2, 3, 4 times over, maybe 100 times over. And it's a very interesting story. But there are many interesting stories. And let's hear from Greg about which ones interest him, because I bet your interests overlap, everybody. Good morning. How are you, Greg?
Hey, good morning.
Hi.
So what's new?
Coronavirus. It's novel, anyway.
Yeah. The Amy Coney Barrett hearings are happening in the background, so I have the sound off while I'm on the show. But
okay.
I could see
Nice,
Lindsey Graham. She's wearing a mask. He's not. Interestingly,
nice
Mike Lee says he's going anyway in person, even though he was positive a couple of days ago.
Yes, he's still
because his
positive.
doctor says that he's negative, and all the other doctors I know online are saying this is ridiculous. You can't do that. As an example, the mayor of Miami was positive, and like 17, 18 days later, he finally got a couple of negative tests.
Well, good.
So, if you're a fanatic, you're perfectly willing to put everybody else's lives in danger for what you're fanatic about. And that's basically the subtext of this entire hearing.
Excellent. That is, other people, for those of you not entirely certain, other people are not important to Republicans. and they really don't care. His clearance apparently comes from the Office of the Attending Physician.
Who doesn't want the senators to get tests regularly, which is insane.
Right. And he doesn't want to be fired as an attending physician, which he would be if he insisted on reality. Yeah, a little bit. So he doesn't care. He'll sign off on anything. But just another footnote to all this, especially, I guess, as the Barrett hearings are going forth, and we know all of what's riding on that. Mike Lee does not pay that doctor. Mike Lee doesn't pay for insurance that pays that doctor. That's a doctor who is provided to him for his convenience because he's a senator, free of charge or very nearly free of charge. I believe they pay a $500 flat fee, yes, each year for all the health care you can consume from this doctor who gets paid out of the Navy budget. So, love the military, want to support the troops? Well, we're subtracting money from that pot to allow people like Mike Lee to get free testing, free care, free diagnostics, and free excuse notes from the Office of the Attending Physician. Yay! Socialisms.
So when I prepare for the show,
yes,
what I generally do is get together a bunch of stuff I want to talk about and put it together in topics.
All right.
There's the election and the polls.
That's a good idea. I should do
and there's the general gestalt, and here's weird stories that you otherwise wouldn't see unless we mention it. And there's the Amy Coney Barrett hearings.
Yes.
And I never really know what we're going to talk about until we start talking, and then I pick that topic and start going into it based on what I have here and what I remember and what I make up on the air as we go along. That's how it works,
Yes.
Do not try this at home if you're not a professional. I'm not a professional, so
right. So this is evidence that you should not try it.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm doing this as a warning. I'm just trying to save yourself. But I picked out this article on the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, and I have a lot to say about that. But this one in particular, at least you get a judge out of it, and talks about the fact that everybody knows, including Ben Sasse, that the Republicans are getting clobbered. Trump is losing. They'll probably lose the Senate over this, among other things, but at least they have that. And as they were comforting themselves, telling themselves that, they're looking around, and the image, the meme of the dog with the bowler hat in the cafe where everything is burning, and he's sipping a cup of coffee and says, everything's fine, this is fine. And Sasse is told this meme, which apparently he was unaware of, and said, no, that fits perfectly. I mean, it feels like that all the time. And as they look around, they realize that they kept telling themselves this was worth it. Maybe it's not worth it.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll all find out eventually.
So over the next couple of days, that's exactly we're going to find out. And let's see how they put it in the article. Sasse didn't know the meme. He's semi-retired from Twitter, where he used to maintain a prodigious presence. But he got the concept. Most of Sasse's first Senate term has been dominated by the Trump era. He's about to win his next 6 years, and he'd like to spend it governing. But he said these efforts at governing keep getting derailed. We're constantly doing the dog with coffee mug burning down house stuff.
I see.
And that's true. It's absolutely true.
Yes.
So, it's a big deal. It sounds like they have the votes and nothing's going to stop it. And so the next step is going to be, okay, so what do you do after?
Yeah.
And that's why over the weekend, with all the stuff going on, and remember, I think Claire McCaskill probably said it best. Trump's rally in Florida today is not for his campaign. It won't help him get votes. It's for him. He needs it. His ego needs it. His confidence is shaking. He's scared. He's losing, by the way. He's down in all the polls. ABC Washington Post poll of Trump down by 12 hardly made anybody blink because that's the average.
Yeah, that's no longer. Well, that's an outlier. It's not.
No. I mean, 14, 16, 12. I mean, it's gotten to the point where if you get an 8, it's like, oh, how disappointing.
Yeah.
And yet the average, the aggregates really are telling us it's 10 or 11.
Well, all right.
And Trump's going to lose.
Yay.
And how do we know that? Because the most valuable thing people have is their time. And where is Trump spending his? In places like Florida, which is understandable. In places like Iowa.
Less understandable.
He shouldn't be there. While Biden is going to Ohio and Mrs. Biden is going to Texas. I mean,
Yeah.
he's losing. He's just flat out losing. So you can look at individual polls and say, oh, this particular Michigan poll wasn't what I wanted. Well, there'll be more polls today. New York Times CNN is doing Wisconsin and Michigan today, I believe, at 1 o'clock. And there'll be others. But, he's losing. And so as he loses, we have these hearings as a last gasp. And, Republicans are really worried. So the numbers that Jamie Harrison is running against Lindsey Graham are insane. He raised something like $57 million. These are presidential numbers, not Senate numbers.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's gotten to the point where Harrison and Mark Kelly and some other people are saying, McGrath, stop sending us money. Send it to Al Green so he could win Alaska.
See? Okay. Good message.
Send it to Bollier so she could win Kansas.
Could send it.
And that's all very, very good advice. This is a Politico piece, Green Tsunami, inside Senate Republicans' financial freakout. Democratic Senate candidates are burying Republicans in ad spending after raising historic amounts of money. That's tangentially important to the hearings, because if you want to do anything about the hearings that you can't stop, you better damn well win the Senate.
Yes.
And that's just all there is to it.
Okay.
So as Demand Justice writes in their ad, today Republicans break the promise they made in 2016 to start confirmation hearings for a Supreme Court justice in an election year. Apparently, they don't care about getting caught lying to our faces. They care about taking away your health care. And so the Democrats are going to make that their issue. They're going to make that their message. Even Chuck Schumer was on message. How is Donald Trump responding? He's tweeting today, New York has gone to hell, vote Trump. California's going to hell, vote Trump. The bottom line, when you step back and look at the big picture, is that for 4 years, Trump thought mistakenly, just because James Comey won the election for him, and just because Hillary Clinton was unpopular, and just because there was enough sexism so that nobody wanted to vote for that woman, that Trump's a political genius. And therefore, if he spends the next 4 years only talking to his base, only trying to get his base, that'll be enough for him to win. It's not. He's losing. And with 3 weeks to go, there's nothing he can do about it. So he's tripling down on trying to get as many religious right voters, as we used to call them, as possible. And that's the message about everybody going to hell and vote for Amy Coney Barrett. And if you don't, you're anti-Catholic and everybody needs to vote for me. The trouble with that is that white Catholics are voting for Biden because he's one of them and Trump isn't. And so you can't change that in 3 weeks either. So it's a mess. And as a result, things are going to get worse before they get better. And so these next 4 days are going to be really disheartening, even though Trump's losing, because we're looking at something that has incredible ramifications. Yes. And so we are just going to have to deal with that, and it's not going to be fun. This is Nicholas Bagley writing in The Atlantic, a warning from Michigan. The state previews how far Republican judges will go to obstruct Democrats in office, and that's where the judges in Michigan took away the governor's right to do public health. So she just gave it back to public health, and public health is doing public health. So the same stuff's going to happen. It's just going to be under the public health name instead of the Democratic governor's name. But the point was the Michigan Supreme Court was willing to do this because of partisan politics. Mm-hmm. And so it's a warning that when you have a 6-3 court, things are not going to go particularly well. Right. Here's another one from Richard Hasen. Trump's new Supreme Court is coming for the next dozen elections. And that is in New York Magazine, The Intelligencer. And he talks about Barrett confirmation to make it more likely we'll see a significant undermining of the already weakened Voting Rights Act. The court said on Friday it will hear a case involving the law. A 6-3 conservative court might allow unlimited, undisclosed money in political campaigns, give more latitude to states to suppress votes, especially those of minorities, protect partisan gerrymandering from reform efforts, and strengthen the representation of rural white areas, which would favor Republicans. And if you want to go from the 50,000 feet view to the on-the-ground view, what's happening in North Carolina now is there's a legal fight over how to fix ballot errors, which has left thousands of voters in limbo, nearly half people of color. And what's happening is that the requirement that you get a witnessed signature in order to have a accepted North Carolina ballot for people who have not been used to doing this is now an issue, and it's going to be in front of the state courts. But the federal judge put the plan on hold October 3rd, arguing it changed the rules too close to Election Day.
Yeah.
And a second federal judge expressed concern that affidavits trying to fix the problem, because North Carolina allows you to fix a problem, would allow voters to dodge the state's witness requirement. The primary method used in North Carolina to prove mail ballots are authentic. It sounds on the face of it like, okay, well, that's just like a technical thing. But in practice, it means disenfranchising people of color. And so what do you do with that? Well, you can't go to the federal courts with a 6-3 conservative majority because you know how they're going to decide. They're going to decide, well, too bad.
Yes, most likely.
Right? So you have all of that as being the background, and that's why fixing the problem may mean Supreme Court adjustment.
Okay.
Not necessarily court packing, but court expansion or court reform, because if you don't, you screw too many people simply to not do it. And that's why people have spent, the weekend trying to pin down the Biden-Harris ticket on how do you feel about court packing, which is ridiculous given the fact that everything else that Trump is doing, including killing everybody, is really the bigger issue. The proper answer to that from the Biden campaign is we don't know because we don't know what the Senate's going to do. Let's see what the Senate does.
Yeah.
And they don't want to accept that. Larry Wilmore had a good line about that. He said, it's these undecided voters. They can't decide, he said. Paraphrasing him, he does it better than me. So, Judas, he's not perfect. He's a snitch. But Jesus never said what he's going to do about court packing. How am I supposed to decide?
Right. Sorry, can't help you.
Sorry, can't. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous if there's any undecideds. But it's also ridiculous that somehow or other, the 0.007% of voters who think that's the primary issue over all other issues are undecided on Biden based on that. Nonetheless, reporters decide that it's going to be their but her emails thing because they want a more balanced race. So they're going to keep asking, and they have the right to ask. They should ask, but they have to understand that they're going to be rebuffed. When that happens with Trump, they give up after 24 hours.
Yes.
The difference is with Democrats, they'll keep pounding on it until Election Day because that's just what they do.
Yeah. Well, luckily, large portions of the electorate will have voted by the time they get annoyed by these stories.
Well, that's the thing. By Election Day, I think 70% of the country is going to be voting. And the number of people who are voting now is just phenomenal. I saw some statistics from Connecticut, which are pretty amazing. Remember, Connecticut's never had a vote by mail, anybody can vote with an excuse kind of situation before. You needed a valid excuse to get a pre-election mail ballot, absentee ballot.
Yes.
But this year, for 2020 only, and many states are doing 2020 only rules, they said you need an excuse, but on your application for your ballot, we'll send everybody in the state an application. Only those who send in the application will get their ballot beforehand. And on that application, check off the box. It's right in the instructions. Check off the box that says, I'm doing this because of COVID.
Okay.
So they made it very easy, and a lot of people did that. And as it turns out, there were something like 500,000 ballots requested, which is unheard of for Connecticut. Like I said, we don't usually do this. And of those requested ballots, 30% or so have already been returned. Yes. And that represents nearly 10% of the entire 2016 vote. It's really amazing for a state that's never done this before. So what I'm saying is that, you know what, people are really eager to vote. All this stuff about enthusiasm, I'm less enthusiastic for Biden, and I'm more enthusiastic against voting for Trump. Well, that means you got your ballot, you filled it out, you sent it in, you dropped it off in the drop box. If you didn't send it in, you're happy to do so. A ton of people are doing this, and that's happening all over the country. I don't think Connecticut is unique in that particular regard.
No, well, the voting by mail new for a lot of people. Oh, of course, there are entire states that do all of their voting that way. And
yeah, about 5 of them, but for the rest of us,
exotic.
We're just learning how to do it. And yes, there's going to be a certain degree of ballot rejection because of this.
Yes.
But the numbers are so overwhelming, I don't know if that matters. But here's the thing. Not. We know that the numbers are really impressive. Something like 9 million people have already voted. And we know that it's overwhelmingly favoring Democratic registries, the party. If you go by party, it's half of them are Democrats, and then another third of them are NPAs, no party affiliation, independents, whatever you want to call them. And then maybe 20% Republicans, 25% Republicans, and it turns out that that's great. What we don't know, though, and the reason you can't look at that and say anything other than, well, it's consistent with Trump losing by 12 points, but it doesn't prove anything because we don't know how many Republicans are going to wind up voting on Election Day. We know there's going to be more Republicans voting on Election Day than Democrats. We know more Democrats are going to do it early than Republicans. We don't know what kind of lead in individual states Democrats have to build in order to be confident that they'll have enough of a lead to carry through Election Day, because we've never done it quite this way before. So it's a fascinating look. It makes you feel good to see all those Democratic votes coming in. Is it enough? We don't know. But I'd rather see them come in and bank them, because that means, first of all, they're there. Second of all, in those states who give you the opportunity, you can go and fix it, like North Carolina. It means that the Democratic Party that knows that you voted can stop wasting resources on you. I'm getting more calls from Republicans than I am Democrats at this point. I've already voted. And Tim Scott is still trying to convince me to drop some cash.
He's a nice guy, though.
To help him keep the Senate. So all of that's good. And we'll go into some of those polling numbers a little bit more after the break.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's lots to cover and lots of people learning how to vote this way.
It's Monday chaos. We do our best to try to, cover everything over the weekend.
Right. Well, we only have a certain amount of time to do it, and there's so many things we have to cover. We'll get back to it, of course, in just 2 minutes, and lots of vote-by-mail stories still to come, plus the polls after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Networks Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us, sending me dirty pictures in the email here. What is this? A fun sign that we're not going to be able to read and discuss on the air, but you may have seen Marcos circulating it on Twitter earlier, and I guess we can grab Marcos's tweet and put that in the roundup. Everyone will be able to see it and translate it on their own time, but some fun parodies of the Trump yard signs, and I knew yard signs were important, and this was why.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at the 538 national poll aggregate here.
National. All right.
We have Uncle Joe Biden, 52.3, and Donald Pandejo Trump, 41.9. And that's a widening lead for Biden. So the polls aren't tightening, they're widening, which was the title of my pundit roundup today. And imagine, if you will, look at some of these numbers. We had the ABC Washington Post poll that was a plus 12. And today we have USC Dornsife, which is a plus 13 and a plus 12, depending upon how you ask the question, for Biden. Mm-hmm. So 12s are the norm these days. And Trump is at 41.9. Remember, it isn't just the distance between the two numbers, it's what those numbers are. Biden is over 50. He's at 52.3. If all the undecideds in the world decide for Trump, Biden still wins. and Trump at 42. We don't know that all the undecideds are going to vote because, as Larry Wilmore notes, a lot of those undecideds are like, what? Maybe they'll decide not to vote. What if Trump actually hits his number? And that's not unusual. Romney did. You look at the polls and where was Romney in the polls and what did he actually get? He got what the poll said he was going to get. Mm-hmm. What if Trump gets 42? I mean, 42 is the answer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What if Trump gets 42?
What if?
What if that's all he gets? Because the way
loses.
things are going, that might happen.
Yeah.
And that's why Claire McCaskill's point about, going to Florida is for his own ego. You're talking in the Villages, a 500 golf car parade for Biden. I mean, that's unheard of in the Villages.
Well, I mean, I didn't.
Florida's still a close state. We don't know who's going to win, but
all the time.
What if Trump actually performs like his polls say he's going to perform? What if the polls are right? It means that he's going to lose, and it probably means that the Democrats are going to take back the Senate. And once that happens, and only after Biden wins, only after the Democrats take the Senate, can you talk about the proper fix to what happens with Amy Coney Barrett in the hearings today?
Yes.
You can't really deal with it until that happens, but it's necessary, not sufficient, but it's necessary for Biden to win and the Democrats to take the Senate before you have any recourse.
Yeah. It's an interesting question that they keep pressing him on. Of course, he'll play a role in it, obviously, but it's really more of a question for senators. They have to do this thing first,
right.
And House members who have to vote.
It's up to the Senate. It's not up to Biden.
Yeah.
This is not a presidential decree, so they'll have to decide. But first, they have to have the election.
Yeah.
Now, this is ABC News Washington Post poll. Powered by trust on the pandemic, Biden leads by 12 points nationally. He holds a 17-point lead over Trump to trust to handle the coronavirus pandemic. Mm-hmm. And the write-up for it starts with that because that is the election. It's always been the election. I've said that from the beginning. Once the pandemic started, it's going to be the issue. It remains the issue. As you pointed out at the beginning of the show, things are getting worse, not better, and it's going to be the issue.
Yes.
In the aftermath of his own COVID-19 diagnosis, 2/3 of registered voters say Trump failed to take appropriate precautions against the virus.
He did.
I'm looking at you, Mike Lee. 62% distrust what he says about it, and 8 months since its arrival, 21% say it's under control. So he's going around the country saying everything's fine. He's the dog with the bowler hat, and it ain't working. Also damaging to Trump, 58% disapprove of how he's handled the pandemic, essentially steady since July, and a new high. 73% are worried they or an immediate family member might catch the coronavirus or say it's already happened. Right? The secret vote are those families affected by the virus when they hear Trump say it's nothing.
Yes.
Well, worry about the virus remains a significant independent predictor of support for Biden over Trump. And in a close race like in Iowa or Ohio or even Texas or Georgia or Florida, that may make the difference. The presidential race stands at 53-41 among registered voters and a similar 54-42 among likely voters. Yet again, a different poll showing registered voters and likely voters aren't that different. So the NBC Wall Street Journal decision to just go with registered voters is fine, with minimal support in the low single digits for the Libertarian and Green Party candidates. They're like 6%. And by the time the election comes around, they're going to be 3%. So there's really there's no pool of third-party voters that Trump can use in order to try to win with. And that's important because Amy Walter wrote a piece about that this morning, as a matter of fact. And pointed out in a tweet, to be successful, the thread the needle re-election strategy Trump's had for a year, 3 years, 4 years.
5 years.
Is 4 points. Unite his base, which he's mostly done, although there's cracking in it. Find a deeply flawed opponent. He was hoping to run against Bernie, didn't work, and then he wanted to run against Hillary, and that's not how it works.
Okay.
Number 3, decent support among independent voters. He's not getting that because of the pandemic. And number 4, third-party candidates siphoning votes off. Kanye didn't do it for him.
Yeah.
So Amy Walter concludes, of the 4 things that he was counting on, only 1 is there, and even that's a little shaky. And so that's why the ABC Washington Post poll is showing what it's showing. Now, the race is tied among men. 48-48.
Oh, okay. I mean,
okay.
There is more than just
women,
them.
It's not tied.
Right. Good job.
Actually, it's 59-36.
All right. I think women might be
This is
smarter.
the widest margin among women for any presidential candidate in exit polls dating to 1976.
All right.
And that includes 62-34 among suburban women, 54-41 among suburban white women, Biden 69-25% among moderates, if it holds, would be a record. And his result among independents, which is not statistically significant, is the widest for a Democrat in exit polls since 1988.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the current contest. It's not remotely close enough to Election Day to be predictive. So that's, as you know by now, is what we call the to be sure graph.
Yes, okay.
To be sure, this doesn't
disclaimer.
prove he's going to win. But look no further than 2016. Hillary Clinton held a 12-point lead on October 22nd. That was following the sexual assault allegations against Trump and disclosure of his lewd comments in Access Hollywood. That contracted to Trump +1 8 days later, as GOP voters set aside their doubts, and +2 Clinton a week before the election. Trump, moreover, has ammunition. 54% now approve of his handling of the economy, but he's only beating Biden by a point on that.
Okay.
And so those are the good points. However, the coronavirus dominates everything.
Yes.
Now, nearly twice as many registered voters say the economy is the single most important issue in their vote. 29% has picked the pandemic, 15%. And while that's a 6-point increase for the economy as the top issue, the potential benefit for Trump is mitigated by a drop in another of his go-to issues, crime and safety. That's not a top concern. You'll remember, not only did he stop running ads about it because it wasn't working, he ran out of money, and so he can't run ads about it.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, I wonder if he had money with it.
There's the stupid enthusiasm piece, which, as we talked about, is really non-existent because anti-Trump beats pro-Biden as far as importance.
Okay.
Strong enthusiasm for Trump far surpasses its level among supporters. Biden runs well ahead of Clinton's strong enthusiasm. But Trump is disconnects beyond the pandemic. And again, people can say it's the economy, but the pandemic hits them in an emotional gut way. And they also understand the relationship between the two, which is hard to get at in polling. 79% of registered voters say they're prepared to accept the outcome of the election, which is very good. A commitment Trump has refused to make. And 56% say he's not paid his fair share of taxes, which is the fallout from the New York Times stories. So it's penetrating. It's just that's not the big issue.
All right.
Trump is bad on so many other issues that not paying his taxes is not the important issue. Yes, it's true. Yes, we accept that. But it's the pandemic. 18% say they're either not prepared to accept the election's legitimacy or it depends on the outcome, identical to the result in 2016.
Oh, well, all right.
But it's a bipartisan result. 22% of Trump supporters are unready, 16% of Biden's. So not too different than 2020. That's what happens when you get your emotions high. You know, Yankee Red Sox game. Well, there was a lousy call that won the game, and I'm not prepared to accept it. Well, you know, fine. It was a lousy call, but most people will accept it even though it was a lousy call. Well, I'm not. Okay, fine.
Right. Well, I don't see any reason to
stands.
say no yet. I'd say, I mean, I guess we should be, I don't know. I don't know whether we should be thankful or not for the one honest answer that Trump is able to give to anything is, I don't know, I'll see what happens, and then I'll decide later, is it good for me or bad for me? That my principles will be formed then. But yeah, I don't feel any need to say, no, I won't accept the outcome of the election at this point. I don't know that it isn't the case, but I guess ask me later. What election are we talking about? Yeah. Let me see what happened. Oh,
we'll see. I
mean, I guess
I'm
with Trump on that.
As court reform, depends.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. So that seems to be a fair answer. If it's a fair answer,
it's a fair and normal answer. Yeah. Right.
I don't
know.
And
then there's the question of Trump's overall job performance.
Okay.
This is Gary Langer's write-up, by the way. Langer is such a good pollster.
Okay.
Among all Americans, 44% approve, while 54% disapprove. It's about the same among registered voters and likely voters alike. The result almost exactly matches his vote preferences, underscoring the extent to which the election is a referendum on the incumbent. So if you want to be an optimist for Trump, you'll say that the final vote isn't going to be where he is in the polls. It's not going to be 42. It's going to match his approval, which is going to be 44.
Well, yes, if you want like logic and all that stuff.
But maybe not. It doesn't always work that way. Romney matched his voting preference.
Okay.
Not his favorability. And so other people, it's their favorability. In this particular case, it's not that different. It's 1 or 2 points. And you could have people who like Trump but won't vote for him because they stay home because they're undecided voters in the Franklin's group who just can't decide. And besides, can you tie my shoes for me because I just don't know which one to do first.
Okay.
You can have that. But his approval rating, Langer points out, has been underwater in 22 of 23 polls since he took office, and the pandemic is where Trump and the public most consequentially part company. In one example, while Trump has equivocated on mask wearing and social distancing, 74% of registered voters think these steps can substantially reduce their chance of catching the virus. Okay. Among likely voters who support Biden, 95% think so. Among who's back Trump, it's 46%. So you have people in the Trump cult who will say, I'll do whatever he says, which is why everybody in the public health field has been so angry with Trump for not leading by example. Still, on the whole, the public gets it. Despite his diagnosis, 59% think Trump is healthy enough to carry out his duties. That's probably true. The issue, though, is his performance, and concerns there clearly are focused more on the president personally than on the federal government generally.
Yes, more on the president.
If the feds do something right, Trump doesn't get the credit anymore.
Okay.
That's important. The 21% who say the outbreak is completely or mostly under control is up from 14, but many miles from a positive result. And impacts of this assessment are profound among people who think the outbreak is completely or mostly under control. 90% support Trump. Among those who think it's somewhat under control, it's 51-43 Trump-Biden. And among who think it's not under control, it's 91% Biden.
Yeah. Well, the truth is it's not, so I guess good. There should be more people who believe that, and 91% of that more say Biden. All right.
Right.
Good.
Let's look at groups now. Biden's best support comes from Democrats, 96%.
Okay. Sure.
Liberals, 93%, which is weird. More Democrats than liberals.
Yes, there's a thing.
It's not that, of Democrats, some are liberal and some are not. Liberals are only supporting Biden 93%, but Democrats are supporting Biden 96%. Liberals fix that. Black people, 87. Those with a postgraduate degree, 73. Moderate, 69. That's very impressive. City residents, 65. Okay. And Trump's are Republicans, 90%.
Yes.
Right? Remember,
lower.
Biden's getting 96% of Democrats and Trump's only getting 90% of Republicans. And there are more Democrats than Republicans.
That too.
Conservatives, 84. Evangelical white Protestants, 79. That's good, but he needs it to be like 90. Rural residents, 58. That's impressively not high. And those with no more than a high school diploma, 57. Right? He needs to be over 60 to win. He's not getting it. Notable here is that Trump loses 9% of Republicans to Biden, while Biden loses 4% of Democrats to Trump, although it's that 12-point Biden lead among independents that really makes the big difference. And it stands out as well that the race is evened up among men. He's a slight 11-point Trump is among white men, plus 11.
That's not slight.
Biden is a plus 7 among white women.
All right.
The far bigger gap among whites is on the basis of education. But amazingly, among whites overall, it's 49-47. We figured Trump needs to do much better there. We figured Biden has to do at least 40 among whites. Okay. In this poll, he gets 47.
That's higher.
Right? Clinton got 37.
All right. Well, that one didn't work. So higher than that is better.
Right? Trump, Biden. Trump gets 45% of white Catholics. Biden gets 51. Remember, they're running around calling him anti-Catholic.
Yes.
Right?
The anti-Catholic Catholic.
Trump against Clinton. Trump got 61 and Clinton got 37. Trump's getting 45 and Biden's getting 51.
Yeah. All right.
That's enormous. Okay. So among age 18 to 64, Trump is 40-56 against Biden.
Okay.
That's a 16-point difference. It was only a 4-point difference for Trump Clinton. So Biden's doing better in just about all of those areas. But the one that really jumps out at you not only is women, where Biden's doing better than Clinton did, but the white Catholics, amazingly better, and moderates, amazingly better. Biden is doing 44 points better with moderates than Trump. Clinton only did 12 points.
Okay, well.
Right. So that's very, very impressive.
I'd say so.
Last question is how people vote. 40% of likely voters now say they plan to vote on Election Day, which is a historical low. And 58% instead say they'll vote early or already have voted.
Okay.
Compared to last month, more say they'll vote early in person. 21%, or by mail, 23%. So if 60% of the vote in this poll is going to come in before Election Day, and some people estimate as much as 70%.
Yeah.
That means that last-minute things don't really make that much difference. And if people are already at this point deciding that they're pro-Biden over Trump, that's big news.
Yeah.
So I think it's worthwhile going over that in detail because it really gives you an idea of where things stand and also gives you an idea of how do you expect things to change. I haven't seen the hearings. They're on in the background. I'm not listening to them. Okay. I would expect the Republicans to do their best to play up Lindsey Graham so he looks senatorial compared to his opponent, Jamie Harrison, who's running a brilliant race. I would expect them to attack Democrats for being anti-Catholic, which, again, is crazy. Who are you going to attack, Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden?
Both.
They're both Catholic, though.
Yes, but so what? That's it. That's the end of the argument, I think.
Right. And so we still have the issue of exactly when Trump was infected with the virus. How long is he infectious? Why is he out on the trail? Why is Mike Lee there? Virus. Everything is going to be a focus on the virus. And Trump's going to lose. So that's my summary.
Yeah, well, that's a good summary. I guess, I would like to... someone who's taking a peek at the hearings can tell us whether Tom Tillis showed up. He's not... I don't think he's strictly necessary for their quorum.
Well, Tillis is a bigger masker.
Is he
so
there?
I would expect him to do it virtually, just like Kamala Harris is going to be virtual.
Yeah. So I guess Lee was about saving... what's his name? Graham, the embarrassment of having to try to force through a last-minute rules change in terms of establishing a quorum, I guess, is what he's trying to do. So easy enough to predict. They were not going to let illness get in their way. And if they were sick and coughing and obviously contagious, they'd still show up and then say, if you don't like it, get out of the room. So they're a little crazy.
All right. Well, that's it for today.
Okay.
Maybe I'll go watch a little bit of the hearings, but not much of it. I really, don't want to be depressed by watching people do what shouldn't be done, and then you can't really do much about it. I think the onus really has to be on winning the Senate and then making them pay for the mistakes.
Yes. Okay. And so we can
forgive and remember.
And and it's a fine answer to give. I guess I hope Biden can come up with a formulation that finally makes reporters say, no longer an interesting question. I'm not certain why he can't simply say, I really don't know exactly what's going to happen, but if Republicans make this enormous mistake, we will certainly be open to thinking about ways to correct for it. Okay. I mean, what does that mean, court packing? What? I say, court packing, and it's going to happen, and you're not going to like it, and then that's that. Then we'll have people on the court, and you'll grouse about it for a little while, and then it'll go away because in 48 hours you'll get tired of saying, "This is terrible," and
By the way,
that's going to be the new Supreme Court.
As you know, because we've talked about it on the show. I had the opportunity to actually go to Alaska, so now it's one of my more favorite states. And I noticed a story this morning. Alaska Republican Senator Dan Sullivan,
that guy, is
caught in a new environmental scandal, and it's one that could derail his re-election chances in November. And it's got to do with Pebble Mine.
Yeah.
Right. because Pebble Mine has the opportunity and risk of ruining the environment.
Yes.
And Democratic
Bristol
challenger
Bay.
Al Gross is running an ad blitz because of all the money we raised for him and sent him collectively.
Yay. Yes.
Blasting Sullivan for his ties to Pebble Mine, a controversial Alaskan mining project. Sullivan's political crisis centers around Pebble Mine, a years-long contested project that would bring large-scale mining to Bristol Bay, which is a watershed, a mineral-rich region that supports the largest sockeye salmon fishery in the world.
Yes.
There's 5 kinds of salmon. Right?
Good.
And home to
like
more
them,
than 24 federally recognized tribal governments.
Yeah.
The senator has received tens of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from lobbyists, executives, and employees involved with the project. Mm-hmm. And Judd Legum was one of the many people who helped to show that. And then there were tapes, which the Pebble Mine people were saying, we got a lot of money and we're giving it to people, and Murkowski and Sullivan won't be an issue. And so that's a problem.
Okay.
Democratic challenger Al Gross has been funding new radio, TV, and digital ads blasting Sullivan for his ties to Pebble Mine, prompted by a recent investigation that showed how mining executives envisioned the reach of the project growing larger than had been publicly stated.
Oh.
If elected, Al Gross, who is registered as a nonpartisan, would caucus with the Democrats like Bernie and Angus King. Gross is backed by national groups including Indivisible, the DSCC, and anti-Trump conservative group Lincoln Project. And they focused on exposing environmental crimes, published secretly recorded conversations between undercover actors who had pretended to be potential Pebble Mine investors. It's really an interesting story. And the Pebble Limited Partnership, Tom Collier, CEO, and the head of its parent company. In these tapes, the parent company CEO, Ronald Thiessen, made clear to the fake investors the company would aim to expand Pebble further than it has already applied to build, contradicting
huge,
Pebble Mine's written submissions to the House Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee when he stated Pebble has no current plans for expansion. Well, they want to expand, and the majority of Alaskans have consistently opposed the mining project since at least 2012, and so now it's an issue. So hopefully that will power Al Gross to win the Senate, win it on the environmental issue, and by the way, be available to discuss this whole thing of court reform should it be necessary, which we don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty big issue there. I remember it from a long time back. And Bristol Bay, as you mentioned, the salmon, huge resource for Alaskans and for everybody who likes to eat those fish. I don't. The fish are happy about that. But Bristol Palin is named for Bristol Bay, in case you're not sure how important Bristol Bay is to the Alaskan economy, as they might say.
But they don't like Palin's in Moss Hill anymore. I know because I've been there.
But
that's what they told me.
But
so
even Palin's
let me just end
Bristol
by
Bay.
pointing out in The Economist today, 91% chance for Biden, 9% for Trump to win, and 538, which is a bit more conservative in that regard, still is changing. It's 86 for Biden and 14% chance of Trump winning. Remember, 14%, 8%, 9%, these are not zero. These things could still happen, but to be sure, Trump could still win, but he's not going to.
Yeah, well, okay. All right. Well, what would get it to zero? If he died from COVID, it would get to zero, I think.
Well, after the election, after he loses, it's zero.
Okay. Well, all right.
So
you
that's
could wait.
The story. Take care, and we'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll see what happens, especially with the hearings, but with everything else.
Okay. Very good. We'll keep an eye on
Polling at 1
hearings.
o'clock. Keep an eye out for it.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll keep one eye on that and the other on the clock, I guess. Okay, great. Thanks very much. And on Wednesday, I look forward to hearing what you managed to sneak in about the hearing. It's hearing twice in the same
What are people saying around
sentence.
the water cooler?
We'll find out. Maybe Armando will decide to tell us too. All right, very good. Good idea to run away before I engage you in another conversation. Lots to catch up on, of course, everywhere. And now I'm interested in that. Greg was reading from The Intercept on the Bristol Bay situation with Sullivan. So, that would be great. We'll take any late-breaking story like that can help boost another Senate seat over the top. And, nothing would be better nothing would be better than defeating Trump. Nothing could be better on top of that than a huge wave of Democratic victories going along with it. so that, we have the voting power to make the corrections necessary to the mistakes, if you want to call them that, or just straight up evils being perpetrated by the Republican majority right now in the form, most visibly, of the Barrett hearings taking place opposite our show today, which is a terrible decision for the Senate Judiciary Committee. But what else were they going to do? All right, let's see. Other news to cover over the weekend. I'm going to use the last minute or so before our next break to sort of skim over those other stories. We mentioned all of the voting by mail and absentee voting going on. California evidences new stories about dirty tricks being perpetrated all over the place. It's a big story out of California about somebody putting out fake ballot collection boxes, complete with signs that, of course, declare them to be official ballot collection boxes, and they aren't. Some question about what would happen to the ballots that ended up in there. You're not supposed to allow anybody but the voter to hand it in at a collection place, pre-designated and monitored by official staff, or by mail. And so, even handing your ballot to a friend to drop in the mailbox for you is technically a problem in a lot of states. So we'll see what happens to any things that are dropped in there. I just note for the record that I guess there are some Republican activists, or at least one anyway, out there taking pictures of himself dropping his ballot in one of these fake boxes, or getting ready to drop his ballot in one of these fake boxes, and giving the thumbs up sign and tweeting out the picture. And people are worried that people were laughing about the fact that he was tweeting this out to his audience, which is mostly Republican, and now maybe a bunch of Republicans in a huge cell phone would go out to these fake ballot boxes and drop their ballots in them and possibly see them invalidated. Although I'm always suspicious of this sort of thing, and I'm wondering, is this guy even slimier than we originally thought? Did he pose giving the thumbs up as though he was going to drop the ballot in the box and then say, "Psh, the hell with that, I want my ballot to count," and walk away and put it in to the mail or hand it in, or what? Will he fool his own supporters or just locals? Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Time to pick up where we left off. I was saying, actually, let me clarify just a bit. My question about this loony right-wing activist, and I guess I should go and find the tweet about it so that we can all be on the same page, at least when the recap comes around in the afternoon. But I saw the story. And let's see. This one is reported in the Orange County Register and was tweeted around by Amanda Marcotte, who has I differed from her slightly in my interpretation of what might be going on, but I'm just guessing. Amanda's absolutely right in the possibility that this is, as she says, an own goal. How did she put it? Her comment, "Gotta love an own goal. Right-wing trolls put up fake drop boxes, but the voter who fell for it is a Republican and sent other Republicans to the fake box." Although here's a good important observation. Somebody else, Kate Baldwin here, weighing in, saying they're not trolls. From the story, it is actually an operation of the California Republican Party designed to do ballot harvesting. They collect the ballots and then take them to a real drop-off location, but it still may be illegal and backfire. And that's the top-line story. Amanda's correct about that. Kate is correct about that. I only, in deciding to take things further and have more ridiculous permutations of the story, started to think about this possibility. So the Orange County Register report is, "Unofficial ballot drop boxes popping up throughout the state worry elections officials. Promoting such boxes," the subheader says, "which have been found in Los Angeles, Orange, and Fresno counties could be a felony." So that's a big part of the problem. I mean, you're not allowed to just set up a ballot collection box in most states, maybe all states. And certainly you can't put up a box and say, "This is official." Anyway, so here's this picture of this guy, Jordan Ty, maybe, Tygh. I don't know how he pronounces it. Tweeting a picture of himself with a mask on. It's important. Giving the thumbs up next to one of these boxes holding what appears to be the return envelope of an official ballot. I don't know how well it matches the actual appearance of a real California ballot, but I have no particular reason to believe that that isn't a real ballot and it hasn't been filled out by Jordan and he intends to cast it. My question is standing next to such a box, or even he might even be kneeling next to such a box, with the thumbs up and holding a ballot, indicative of his having dropped that ballot in that box? My question is, did he pose like that and tweet it out and then say, to hell with this, I'm not putting my ballot in there. I'm going to put it in a place where it's going to be counted correctly. My hope is that other people will think I dropped it in there because I gave the thumbs up and I was next to it, and most people would conclude I would put my ballot in there. And the weakness of that theory, as Amanda pointed out as well, he tweets his stuff out. I mean, who follows him on Twitter? It's Republicans. They're the ones who are going to be fooled. Even if he didn't put his ballot in there, it's still an own goal because he's encouraging a bunch of other Republicans to go put their ballots in that box or in boxes like it. But I am not so sure. I think it may also just be a wink to his followers. This is happening, and you should all encourage people, in the neighborhoods where these boxes are put out to vote this way. Because here's the idea. They're put in neighborhoods where if they successfully siphon off votes by invalidating them and having them dropped in this unofficial box, and maybe they don't even show up at an elections office, but I guess they can still avoid charges of whatever they would charge you with for stealing other people's ballots and then destroying them. They can still avoid that charge by simply actually dropping off the box at the county elections board, whereupon they can be pretty certain that elections officials will invalidate all the ballots in it because of the harvesting operation that it evidences, which is illegal. And the end result is the same, but they can avoid the charge of throwing, that would stem from destroying or throwing out the ballots, and they can then try their hand at claiming ignorance when they're tried for the illegal act of setting up the box in the first place. I thought we were helping. But what I'm wondering is he giving the thumbs up and sending that out in the hopes that other Republicans will send it out, in the hopes that other Republicans will set up such boxes and set them up in neighborhoods where people, if they wander by or happen to see on Twitter or elsewhere that there is such a box and are fooled by it, they'll go and put their ballots in it. But Republicans, wink, wink, don't put your ballots in there, as I didn't. He doesn't go ahead and say so in this tweet because then, of course, it wouldn't work the way he intended it to. But, again, the answer to that, as Amanda was saying, again, the message goes out to Republicans. They're the ones who are going to be fooled by these things. But my objection, I guess, there's no reason to fight about it. It's all, it's all pointing at the same rotten, dirty trick and reminding people not to fall for it. But my supposition is that if I see a box, like I've seen this box in this tweet now, right? Am I going to go put my ballot in it? No, because I don't live in California, but there's more than just that. One, I would know, no, I can't cast my vote in California. I have to cast it in Virginia. True. But even if I'm in California, even if I'm in Orange County, the fact that I see a box there, I'm not, what am I going to do? Say, wow, that box is famous. I'm going to go put my ballot in Jordan Ty's ballot box, or at least the same ballot box that he purportedly used in staging this photograph. Or am I going to say, well, that's it. If I'm fooled by it being real and I'm not in on the joke, I might say, well, if I see such a box in my neighborhood, I'll say, hey, all right. Well, I'm not going to go driving out of my way to go look for this ballot box in near whatever church has given up space to put this thing up, which, by the way, calls into the question, what kind of church is this after all? Anyway, but if it's in your neighborhood, you might not think twice about it, or you might, I don't know, but you would more likely drop your ballot in that box than say, I got to go to Twitter famous Jordan Ty's ballot box and drop it there. So my suspicion is that if you put it in the right wrong neighborhood, you'll get locals to come by. They might even say, hey, I heard about these, or I even saw it on Twitter, or whatever. But I doubt that will even enter into it. They'll just see a box there that says it's official, and they'll put their ballots in it. And Republicans, even Republicans who aren't in on the joke and are fooled by Jordan's tweet, are going to say, well, a box like that would be convenient. I don't see one like that around here, so I will go to my county office, as I was instructed in the first place anyway. I think more people who end up dropping their ballots in such boxes are going to do so because those boxes were placed in close proximity to where they live and work and spend their day, than by far than those who saw it on Twitter, whether they thought it was a real thing or a joke or a dirty trick or whatever. It won't matter. It has to be near you. That's the trigger for getting it to work. And I don't think we should, lose sight of that. And I still think, well, look, if it's an own goal, terrific. What could be worse than having it be an own goal and still getting prosecuted for it? And if it's not an own goal, well, then let's just straight up prosecute for it. And at trial, it might make an interesting thing to tell the jury that this is the picture he tweeted, and then this is the video caught by surveillance cameras of what he actually did at that box. He told everybody else, put your ballots in it, but then he himself walked away, which shows you that he knew what he was doing was wrong, that it was ballot fraud, and that it was a dirty trick. So it makes the decision of the jury that much easier if you have video of him walking away. That's the difference that it'll make. Anyway, lots of other fringy sorts of stories out there, I guess, and some more important stories on top of all of that. I don't know what order we'll get to them all in. Over the weekend, an interesting story, still developing in terms of trying to figure out exactly what happened. But during the early part of the weekend, I guess Trump and his folks thought that they had a big law and order story coming out of, where was it? I don't even know. Was it also in Portland? Let's see. I don't think I even put the story away. I put the pictures away. But competing protests, the protest and counter-protest scheduled for basically the same place at the same time, which reminds me very much of the Russian trolling tricks that we found out about during the 2016 election. Yes, it was in Denver. That's right. I'll have to search for it that way. Put two protests on the opposite sides of various issues in close proximity, and resulted in another shooting and a death at that. And it sounded like in the early part of the weekend, the right wing was hoping to play this as Antifa super soldiers had shown up and killed a protester from the other side, whatever the other side was there protesting. I don't even know. But there's been some interesting video and then even more startling still photos taken of the shooting, which frankly, rank up there with any Pulitzer contender that I've ever seen. And I think there's an actual, honest to God, strong chance for the photographer to win a Pulitzer Prize for capturing this moment, even if it is, a morbid one. I mean, somebody dies in this, but it's a weird story. So let me grab the write-up of it. Let's see. We'll take CNN and their story of it because it pops up right at the top because, I don't know, they pay Google a lot of money or whatever. Or there's a big traffic. You know how they handle those things. I'm not going to... actually, I should see if there's a Denver-based write-up available. Look, here's what the Google algorithm does to everybody. There's a couple of... The stories that include video are up at the top. There's CBS Denver. We can take that one. But the print stories, NPR, CNN, New York Times, Fox News, there's a YouTube video up there, Reuters, there's Denver Post, finally, all the way down there. We'll take the Denver Post right up. I don't know whether the CBS News one is going to do us as much good because they tend to be video focused because they're television, and pay no attention to how to actually report the story. Oh, but I might have too bad. The decision is made for me. Denver Post firewalled their story, and CBS Denver is the winner by default. Okay, good. Well, spread things out a little bit. Doesn't have to be CNN every time. So the story developed over the weekend, and again, this is going to be chiefly video, so I got to pick this out a little bit better and do a little more work trying to figure this out. But Republicans and conservatives attempting to pin this somehow on Antifa. Then it turns out, no, it wasn't Antifa or a protester at all. It was a person who had been hired as a private security guard for a local television station. I don't know, maybe the CBS affiliate in Denver. We'll see if we can find that out from the write-ups. But he was hired as private security, and a video, and then still photos, and then some descriptions from people on the ground or familiar with what was going on. It turns out that the story is that this right-wing protester / counter-protester, I don't know who showed up first, essentially went and picked a fight with a guy that, I don't know, I guess he was in plain clothes, this supposed security officer. And I have to say supposed security officer now because CBS Denver's headline points out that the city of Denver now says that this person who did the shooting, Matthew Doloff is his name, is not licensed to be a security guard. So, that's not so good. You're going to want to comply with licensing requirements, especially if you're going to be carrying a gun, and we don't really approve of that as an idea. And of course, there are others who would remind you, well, we don't really approve of shooting counter-protesters to death either. Although, I have to tell you, having seen video and still photos and seen some descriptions of what was going on, licensed or not, this is not the story that the right wing wanted you to hear at the beginning, that it was some lunatic from Antifa just randomly shooting down good old patriots. This guy is, I think he's probably armed as well. We'll check out the new write-up of the story, but initially police were saying that they had found 2 guns at the scene, the one used in the shooting. The other, I think we were meant to presume, was on the body of the deceased, that he was armed too. And his appearance at the scene in the photos and videos would give every indication that this was the type of person you might assume to be armed, as many of the protesters these days who might be in affiliation with this guy's position often are. But what we do know is that he was also carrying a can of bear spray, the mace type product, pepper spray, that he felt he was entitled to spray liberally in the faces of people who might argue with him. And in the video I saw initially, he's attempting to get in a fight, essentially, with someone there who is apparently there as part of the various protests and who is themselves very confrontational. But there's also plenty of people there trying to make sure that it doesn't, break out into violence, and separating anybody who's getting in the face of the first guy protester, who appears very interested in getting in other people's faces. So they did a pretty good job breaking up that confrontation and that fight, but then that took their eyes off of what the guy who was shot was doing after he was shoved out of the picture of this potential fight. He walked straight on, and within seconds is engaging with the next person that he can find. Except the next person that he could find turned out to be this maybe not licensed security guard who had a gun on him, and he shot him. And the confrontation from the video and pictures together basically consists of him walking up to this guy who I guess since he was in plain clothes, he just thought he was just some skinny white dude and probably a protester from the other side. Or maybe he even knew he was with the news organization and just went up to yell at him about being fake news. They have some words, but it very quickly escalates to this, other protest. The one he calls themselves they call themselves patriots. We call them, armed thugs, right-wing loons, what have you. But this guy walks up, has words with this security guard, and then captured on film is the protester guy smacking the security guard in the face with his left hand, and then bringing up from his hip with his right hand the can of bear spray, can of mace, and spraying it in this guy's face after he's smacked him in the face. And I guess security guard / not security guard guy who's got the gun, from his perspective, what he sees is this guy raising up some object from his right hip in a quick draw fashion and pointing it at him. And, well, the gun came out. The shot was fired. It was extremely quick. And he shot him down, and he collapsed right on the spot. And they took him to the hospital. I believe he died at the hospital. But it was over before it started. Like I said, the photography to be completely passionless about it, the photography is spectacular. They really could win a Pulitzer Prize for this. I mean, it's a series of photos that just tells the whole story in 4 or 5 pictures. But the photography is amazing. The shell ejecting from the gun is caught in midair. It's crazy what you're able to see in this detail. But both people, tension's obviously running high. But the victim appears intent on engaging somebody in a fight, and the security guard appears intent on not letting anybody get the drop on him. And, maybe he could have waited, or maybe he even knew that was bear spray in the guy's hand. It's very difficult to tell. I guess we'll find out at trial what he thought about it. And then we get to the separate issue of whether or not he should have been purporting, holding himself out as a security guard if he was unlicensed on top of all this, and then carrying a weapon. Of course, you don't have to be a licensed security guard to carry a weapon, certainly, and you know what kind of leeway we give people with guns in this country. Let me see what CBS has got written up about it. See if there's any further clarifications. Controversy continued to surround Matthew Doloff, a Denver murder suspect. See, it's easier to get that hung around private people's necks than cops, obviously. Controversy continued to surround him on Sunday. Denver police arrested Doloff after he was seen shooting a man at a Patriot Muster rally on Saturday. That victim, who has not been identified by the coroner's office, later died at the hospital. Counter-protesters were present at the rally. Late Saturday, 9 News identified the suspect as a security guard contracted by them for the rally. So I am reading from Channel 4, which is the CBS News affiliate there, and I guess Channel 9 is their, I don't know what network they're affiliated with, but their competitor. So I don't know if there's any weird glee at hanging this around the neck of 9 News down there in Denver, but they identified the suspect as a security guard contracted by them for the rally. And let's see, then an included tweet here from a reporter from Channel 4 saying, look, the Denver Department of Excise and Licenses confirms there is no record for an active licensed security guard now or ever for an individual named Matthew Doloff, with either spelling, 1 L or 2, but both times with 2 Fs. I don't think he misspells his own name that often. If he was operating as a security guard, he was in violation of the law, which is bad. The Denver folks confirming this, then saying if he was operating as a security guard, it was in violation of the law. That, according to Eric Escudero, department spokesman. Security guards are prohibited from carrying or using a firearm without getting an armed firearm endorsement for their license. All security guards in Denver are required to get a federal background check before they receive their license. Escudero also shared Denver is one of 3 cities in Colorado where security guards are required to have a license to operate, and there is no requirement to have a license in the rest of the state. Security guards are also required to go through training, which includes training on the use of force, which, might have helped here. Doloff had his first advisement hearing Sunday morning. The judge declared the arrest affidavit will be sealed and the defendant will be held on first-degree murder charges without bond. I don't know if they can make first-degree stick, but you could say he had forethought in violating the licensing procedure that he should have known about. But interesting. I mean, if he had just been there as a private citizen and had been smacked in the face and drew his own weapon and shot the guy, they wouldn't have anything to say about it. So it's kind of interesting wrinkle in the story. But I will say this, I bet the Patriot muster guy thought that confrontation was going to come out kind of different. And in all likelihood, he too was armed and figured he'd go smack this skinny white dude in the face. And if the guy fought back, he'd bear spray him. And if that didn't work and he couldn't just kick his ass, he'd pull his own gun and tell the guy to back off. Except, as it turns out, the other guy was armed and just as willing to use his gun very quickly as, well, even a little more willing than the victim himself. And I can't say that it appears for all the world to me like that's the confrontation that this guy was there to get. It's just that he thought he'd draw his weapons first and win, and it turned out not to be true, and you should probably stop doing these things. This is a big favorite among the right-wingers now, to show up at these protests as counter-protesters, carrying mace, carrying paintball guns, a lot of times just doing drive-bys, driving near a protest and indiscriminately macing people out the window of the car, or shooting them from the back of pickup trucks with paintball guns, which, as they're first drawn up, don't look all the time all that distinguishable from regular guns, and it will frighten the hell out of you if you catch it out of the corner of your eye, and those paintballs hurt. And, these guys design it, these attacks with the idea in mind that, if you fight back or shoot at me because you see me draw something like this, I'll just say, oh, it's just paint. What's the problem? You're the one who's the aggressor here. So I don't know. Seems to me like this was a long time coming and we were going to see it eventually. And now we do. And I don't know. I can't say it's a great thing because lessons are learned. I doubt that very much. And I think it'll just result in right-wingers carrying their weapons more obviously and perhaps even shooting at other protesters even faster. But unless the story changes dramatically, I'm not feeling a lot about this guy's shooting, to be honest. That's it. I don't know. Maybe my senses have been numbed over the years. It's a bad gun story, and I think there are too many on the street. But it's usually the argument of the guys like the one who got shot that being armed will create a more polite society, and they forgot the whole. I guess they never really believed it. I guess is all that I can think. It's you should be more polite to me because I'm armed, as opposed to I should be more polite to you because you might be armed. But today he found out the opposite. So I don't know. All right, other stories that are much more important, although that's just sort of an interesting commentary on the undercurrent that's been a part of our society for a long time, well before Trump, but exacerbated by Trump. Let's see. Trump, of course, planning more events, despite the fact that no one really knows what his condition actually is. Sean Connery allegedly, purportedly, is putting out statements daily, clearing him for all sorts of activity, including more rallies around the country. So super spreaders getting on a plane and going to move around the country and presumably give it to other people there. There's a news story over at Yahoo actually following up on people who have attended Trump's rallies in the recent past who are now in the hospital with COVID. So that's of some interest. The numbers aren't as high as we might have expected, but again, usually they keep the president fairly far away from the crowd. And the big issue is people in the crowd giving it to one another, and because that doesn't involve anyone famous, we rarely hear about it in the news. So I'm grateful when there's any follow-up at all. Here, Yahoo News has done it. Chris Riotta, actually, Yahoo News has aggregated Chris Riotta's work for The Independent, the UK newspaper. People who attended Trump's rallies now in hospital with COVID-19 as he plans more events nationwide. And here, just the news. You just turn up one. It's difficult at random to be able. You can't call hospitals and say anybody in the hospital with COVID-19 who was at one of the rallies. It's not information that they collect for handing out to reporters. But here's at least one who attended the Trump rally in Minnesota last month in intensive care after contracting novel coronavirus. And I guess they trace back to the fact that they actually attended the rally, and I suppose that that's the suspicion of where they picked it up. So, well, I guess we can kind of skim through that article, but at least somebody's trying to follow up on some level on all of these things. As I said, Sean Connery supposedly clearing the president in a series of unsigned memos, by the way. Prior Sean Connery memos actually at least carried his initials up by the from line. Now that doesn't even appear on these things. The White House is putting them out daily, fast and furious, with no accountability for anybody and no regard for telling the truth. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So many different directions we can go in. There's about 1 million hours worth of show we could do, but only half an hour left in today's. So we'll have to spread things out over the week. Let's see. Definitely some interesting writing to share with you that you should be reading. And then I guess maybe in the rest of the week we can go to maybe more in depth on what the New York Times is revealing. For the moment, in case you need a catch up on it, we have the Hill's short write-up of what the Times has been spending their weekend on. Tax records show 200 entities funneled money to Trump properties while reaping benefits from the White House, according to the New York Times. This is Justine Coleman's recap of the Times' work over the weekend. A New York Times analysis of tax records showed that more than 200 companies, special interest groups, and foreign governments have funneled millions of dollars to President Trump's properties while reaping benefits from the president and his administration. In other words, basically everything we ever expected out of him. I mean, I think the moment he won the election and we knew, hey, that guy has a hotel in Washington, he's totally going to use that to extract emoluments from people, and he shouldn't even be allowed to own it, much less, even if he were to somehow separate himself from it and refuse to pocket any profits from it in a fashion that we believed, on its face, the contract with the government for leasing the old post office pavilion, which is what the historic property is where the hotel is located, it should, it's very clear. Trump can't be allowed an ownership interest in this thing. But that was chucked out and over the side very early, as Armando and I have been complaining for 4 years now. And so what, right? He's just going to pocket the money and we're all going to watch him do it and say, but the Constitution, it says this thing. I feel like a right-wing lunatic must feel all this time, saying that it's very obviously the case that the Constitution prohibits this. And like the whole court system and the media and law enforcement are all on crazy pills, just saying it doesn't mean that at all, somehow, for some reason. And by the way, the emoluments cases are proceeding in court just fine. They've made it over the objections and insistences from the Trump administration that things should be dismissed. The cases are going forward, but 4 years later, we're nowhere. Anyway, nowhere enforceable. And who knows what's even enforceable against these guys. When the courts rule against them, they don't comply. That's another story that I have left to cover. Let me get through this here. Nearly a quarter of the entities have not been previously reported, so there will be news value in sifting through the New York Times work and finding the new names. 60 patrons who promoted specific interests to the Trump administration spent almost $12 million on expenses associated with the Trump organization during the first 2 years of Trump's presidency. The Times reported nearly all of these customers saw their interests move forward. In interviews with almost, that's nice, at least they got the benefit of the bargain with Trump, which is a rare thing. In interviews with almost 250 business executives, club members, lobbyists, Trump property employees, and current administration officials, sources detailed to the Times how Trump conducted business and interacted with customers who were seeking help from the administration. The newspaper also used Trump's tax return data, lobbying disclosures, Freedom of Information Act requests, and other public records to construct a database of groups, companies, and governments that had business before the administration and spent money at Trump properties. The Trump Organization's customers included foreign politicians, Florida barons, a Chinese billionaire, I bet we know which one, a Serbian prince, interesting, clean energy advocates, that's nice, petroleum industry leaders, that's not so nice, small government advocates, that's funny, and contractors. The newspaper noted that some of the president's customers did not see their interests fully fulfilled, that's very Trumpian, but noted whether they won or lost, Mr. Trump benefited financially. More than 70 advocacy groups, businesses, and foreign governments held events at Trump Organization properties that previously were at different locations or developed new events to be hosted at the properties. Religious organizations, so in other words, people are going out of their way. Religious organizations also participated by throwing prayer meetings, banquets, and tours on Trump properties. At least 24 patrons who reserved events for 2017 and 18 at Trump properties had interests involving the administration. The analysis also found that more than 100 companies that sought action from the federal government spent money at Trump properties. Many of the patrons to Trump's businesses told the Times that any favorable outcome they received from the administration was incidental to their use of Trump properties. Of course, I mean, you have to say that because you're about to be prosecuted. Well, not in this administration, but maybe the next one. The Times noted that the tax records do not include all payments to Trump properties, but additional data is tracked by the town of Palm Beach, Florida, where Trump's Mar-a-Lago club is located. Organizations that had special interests reported spending $3.3 million on events at the club from 2017 to now. The records and membership rosters for Mar-a-Lago and Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, also show how much money his business was making once he sat in the White House. Being a member of his clubs also allowed leaders to get time with the president and sometimes his support, as he offered ambassadorships to 5 members of the club and chose others for advisory roles in his administration. White House spokesperson Judd Deere told The Hill in a statement that the Times report was, quote, just more fake news. Then he lies for a while and they quote him doing it, which I guess they feel is obligatory. We don't have to do it. Deere told the Times in a statement that the president turned over the day-to-day responsibilities of the Trump Organization to his 2 adult sons, and he doesn't trust them with anything. So that's hard to believe and largely irrelevant. Okay, let's see. Other stories that will deserve some time. And let's see, I want to try and dig out some that might be getting missed elsewhere. I mentioned one that I haven't gotten to yet, and I've seen a write-up on it. Let's see, I have at least 2 in pocket here somewhere. One from the New York Times, but since we always spend lots of time on them, let's grab this one from The Guardian, the later of the 2. Although maybe the New York Times one was more to the point headline-wise. Let's see, just to scroll back down and keep you in suspense. I mean, I kind of like the New York Times version of the headline anyway. Explains it a lot nicer, cleaner. Judges tell Trump his officials are serving illegally. He does nothing. 3 high-ranking administration officials now have been found by courts to be working in violation of a 1998 law that governs how a president can appoint temporary officials. And it's hard for me to remember whether we definitely did or didn't tell this story, because we've been telling this story over and over again. And as I was thinking, oh, you know which law I'm talking about here, the Vacancies Act. And then I remembered briefly, I feel like I just said that about something else. But I don't think we had this story mentioned. I can't remember. Lisa Friedman wrote it up for the New York Times on October 5th. Holding a job unlawfully is not a reason to be fired in the Trump administration. Last month, a Montana judge ruled that the acting head of the Bureau of Land Management. Yes, we definitely did think about this because we talked about the BLM acronym for it. I guess it's not an acronym, but the abbreviation for Bureau of Land Management being mistaken by people for Black Lives Matter, right? And that they were, when they were setting backfires to try to control the wildfires, which I understand have now spread to Colorado, by the way, as I hear from my brother who lives out in that direction and had to pack a bag and get ready to evacuate, and thankfully has not had to pick up and dash out of the house, and everything's safe. But that was a surprise to me. I didn't realize that the fires had spread there, but I guess we were all just focused on the coastal fires, which are that much more damaging at the moment. But anyway, now I guess we must at least have made mention of this story. But it was brought to my attention again by some other folks who had sent me the Guardian version of it. And just in case it didn't sink in the first time, the acting head of the Bureau of Land Management has essentially been found to be serving illegally, and I don't know why the judge hasn't issued an order that they must vacate the office and that federal marshals will escort him from the premises, but maybe that's coming at some point. But basically, just another reminder about our worry about Trump leaving office if he is defeated. None of the officials who have been found to be serving illegally by judges have left yet. So, they seem confident at this point. I mean, I guess things change once the presidency is said to have changed hands. But I would guess that people like this BLM administrator, what's the name here? William Perry Pendley, probably think you're going to have to come and drag me out of here, and the president will pardon me anyway. I have the backing of the president. You can't get rid of me. And he just continues to report to work, and we all sit around saying, what happened to Law and Order? He said he was campaigning on Law and Order. Well, he's lying. He's a gimmitarian, and he just says whatever if he thinks the Law and Order message resonates with his base, he'll say it. If he himself is in violation of Law and Order, he'll say, hand wave, fake news. What about Joe Biden? Something like that. And he is literally waving his hands like a maniac. That invisible accordion thing that he does when he's explaining his lies, when they're that egregious, is really something to see. Take a look. That's a Trump hint. That's a Trump tell. I'm about to lie to you. It's not the same thing for me necessarily, but take a look at his videos from the end of last week, in particular the one I've been focusing on in which he comments on how the miracle drug from Regeneron saved him from COVID and made him feel instantly better, and it's a miracle cure, and that he was going to give it to every senior in America for free, which is about, honestly, that's really, for me, up at the top of some of the most outrageous lies that he's told, and is underrated in that respect. To tell people that, one, that this miracle cure exists and can basically render COVID a nullity, because if you catch it and then you take this miracle drug, you're going to be fine. That's not really what actually happened with his COVID, and we'll never find out because his doctors, as I said, are lawyers and are liars. The same thing, really. Lawyers, liars. Well, you pick it. But his doctors are liars and seem intent on doing their best to fool us about the nature of the illness in general and his specific course of illness. And there's nothing we can glean from their reports because we don't even know if they're making the reports at this point. I don't know whether Conley is a willing participant in this or not, because he doesn't sign the memos. So it's going to be very difficult to pin those memos on him if he's ever, for instance, has his license reviewed. But oh well, what are you going to do about that? But I think it's one of the more egregious lies that he's told, to give people this wrong impression, and then to tell people who might believe it for various reasons that I'll be getting this drug for free, only to find out, well, no, nobody's going to give it to you for free. Plus, you can't even buy it. And even if it was made available to you, it would be out of your reach financially, and you're just going to have to die knowing that, worst case scenario, you went out and ignored all advice and contracted the coronavirus because you believed that the president would come riding to your rescue with free miracle medicine at the last second, and instead you're dying, and now you have to know it, and that's how you'll go out, is knowing that you were an idiot and fell for this stupid trick. That bothers me a great deal. And so I've actually been tracking it. How many people have died from COVID rather than be saved by the miracle drug since Trump promised that he was immediately going to, quote unquote, sign an order to make it available to every senior in America and every person vulnerable to COVID-19 in America for free? And the answer is we're nearing 3,000 since the promise. They're probably nearing about 6,000 since he got the drug, except we're a lot less clear on what day and at what time he got the drug. But about 1 p.m. on October 8th, he released a video that he taped earlier in the day, promising it to everybody. And, what are we waiting for? And why is it that a 9/11's worth of people have died waiting for the appearance of Donald Trump's miracle drug cavalry? It's not coming, and you should not believe it, essentially. I mean, like I said, it's one of the more egregious lies he's ever told, and he should be held to account for it. And, in a just world, what can you do? Nothing, because we don't live in one. But in a just world, he'd be paying for that, paying a big price, just like he said in the video. China would be paying for this. It's the sort of thing that makes you wonder about what people in the future will think about how we handled things. Like, for instance, why didn't you hang Donald Trump for being such an egregious liar and doing that to people? And the answer is we're very polite or something, and that's really all I've got. I can't answer it. All right. Let's see. Other stories to share with you that I think we might otherwise never have heard. Here's a interesting tweet thread that because the Amy Coney Barrett hearings are going on in the background, you might find of some interest. R.J. Lehman, who is identified in his Twitter bio as a director of finance, insurance, and trade policy at the R Street Institute. What is the R Street Institute? Well, it's a thing, you see, that I don't know anything about except by clicking on their Twitter account. I can read you their profile. A free market think tank advancing real solutions, which is an awfully stupid thing to say, but to complex policy problems. And they're real because free market, something. I guess we're supposed to believe that that's the case. But he's got an interesting history lesson, which sounds plausible. I mean, I guess you should take it with a grain of salt. It's coming from free market think tank people. Maybe they're making this up entirely, and you've never heard of it, not because it's an interesting tidbit of history that's been lost in the mists of time, but because it's simply not true. But we can check it. There's facts alleged in here, and we can check the record on it. And it sounds plausible. Just thought I'd read it, and we'll check and on the grain of salt later. R.J. Lehman says, some are understandably consumed with the court packing issue right now. And I know a lot of people are sensitive about the terminology. I'm just reading it, and we can discuss the appropriateness of the terminology another time. He says, RJ does, I'm much more interested in D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood, which is another big constitutional hardball issue looming out there alongside and parallel with the court reform idea. All right, let's see. I'm getting a text in the middle of the show, which I really should not be getting. But okay, let's talk. He says... specifically, he was talking about the D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood issues. Specifically, the question of whether it is, as one of the opponents of it said, I can't remember which of the, I think senators maybe said it, rank politics, right? That it's just rank politics to do something like this. And, RJ questions whether that's the truth and even whether rank politics is really a bad thing. So, he says, let's talk about the election of 1888. Every time somebody says, this is just like the election of something, you never know what's going to come out of their mouth. 1888. You may remember, says RJ, that Grover Cleveland is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. You may remember that the grandmother in the movie Parenthood was a little girl when Grover Cleveland was president. I don't know which term, but that's not important right now. The term he didn't serve, the one in the middle there, is the one decided in 1888. Despite getting 90,000 more votes than his opponent, Benjamin Harrison, Cleveland lost the Electoral College that year in 1888. Harrison's Republican Party, who already controlled the Senate, also took back control of the House in that election, earning unified control for the first time since 1881, which sounds like it's a lot longer now in 2020, but back in 1888, that wasn't that long ago, but you get the idea. But it was a fragile control. So they immediately got to work on admitting new Republican states. Isn't that interesting? They won back the Senate and House. I guess they already controlled the Senate. And they took back the House and won the White House and then said, all right, well, what we're going to do here, we have a majority, but it's thin. So we'll admit some new states. And of course, each of those states will have at least one congressional representative and 2 senators, and then we'll shore up our majority. In other words, the long story short of the first part of this thread is they admitted states that were going to be reliably Republican. That's all. In 1889, the Republican Congress admitted 4 new states: Washington, Montana, and the Dakota Territory, which, by the way, didn't have hardly anybody in it, but they split it at the last minute into North Dakota and South Dakota, sort of doubling the take on that. In 1890, they added Idaho and Wyoming. Just as important is the territory that they didn't add. Republicans opted to leave Utah as a territory and not admit it as a state because it was widely understood, at least at the time, that Mormons, they were all over Utah for one thing, but Mormons were overwhelmingly Democrats, I guess, at the time. Thus, Republicans expanded both of their caucuses, House and Senate, with all 8 House members from the new states and all 12 new members of the Senate. Wow, 12. In the short term, the gambit failed. Republicans lost control of the House in 1890. I guess people were pissed about that. They then lost control of the Senate in 1892 and lost the White House back to Grover Cleveland. With unified control, Democrats got their revenge in 1896 when they made Utah a state. And he just says LOL to that because now, of course, it's overwhelmingly Republican. The Republicans also failed to foresee the rise of the Populist Party, which would be competitive in the new states in the 1890s. Populist James Weaver won Idaho's 3 electoral votes in 1892, along with one of North Dakota's 3 electoral votes. Cleveland also got one of the North Dakota votes. The other 15 new electoral votes went to Harrison, but in the long run, it worked out pretty well for the GOP. Control has sometimes shifted, but here we are 130 years later and several realignments later, and 5 of the 6 are still staunch Republican states. 114 of the 179 governors of these 6 states, 64% of them have been Republican over all of the time that they've been states. The class of 1889 and 90 also permanently changed the balance of power in the Senate towards small and rural states. In the census of 1890, the new states included 4 of the 6 smallest by population in the Union. The other 2, Washington and South Dakota, were numbers 34 and 35 out of then 44 states. Today, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana comprise 4 of the 8 smallest states in the Union. Coincidentally, all 4 were part of the original Dakota Territory. So they turned Dakota Territory into 4 states, 8 senators, all Republican. If the 4 were admitted as one state, if you thought about that, they just bring the Dakota Territory into as the state of Dakota, it would still have a smaller population than Connecticut, the 29th largest state. So, it wouldn't even have been out of keeping with the rest of the state populations out there. It'd just be an enormous landmass. It'd be rather difficult to administer that way. The ability to admit new states, he reminds us, is one of the most awesome powers. Awesome powers. It sounds vaguely superhero-like. The ability to admit new states is one of the most awesome powers the Constitution gives to Congress. It requires only simple majorities. Keep that in mind. And once done, it is irrevocable and unreviewable. I'm not sure on what basis he says so, but I bet it's probably true. Probably it's something the framers should have given more thought. And that's probably true too. The check on wielding that power recklessly is the same one the people exercised in 1890 and 1892 when they voted out Republicans. But it's hard to say it wasn't worth it for the GOP. When it comes to D.C. and Puerto Rico, it probably would be worth it for Democrats too. When it comes to D.C., many make the argument that its populated parts should just be returned to Maryland as a compromise. Certainly that's an option, retrocession they call it, but what's the reason for the compromise? D.C. doesn't want to be a part of Maryland, and Maryland doesn't want D.C. What kind of compromise is that? It's a compromise to make Republicans feel better? No, we don't do those compromises. So then you'll often get what I guess is intended as the reductio ad absurdum. If D.C. can be a state, then why not Denver? Why not Boston? Personally, I'm totally on board with a bunch more city-states, but I understand the desire for a limiting principle, so I'll offer 4. 2 are already existing law, both in the admissions clause of the Constitution. 1 is that a new state cannot be created out of an existing state without the consent of that state. State of Jefferson, folks. Remember when they wanted to divide California? State of Jefferson folks may want independence, but California doesn't agree. Number 2, that's also in the Constitution, Congress must agree to admit this state. Technically, the Constitution doesn't specify that this must be done by presidentially authorized legislation, but that's been the norm. So you need 2 chambers to agree and a president to sign. That won't happen often. Number 3 is not required by the Constitution, but also a long-standing norm. Congress should first pass an enabling act, which calls on the territory to draft a state constitution and formally apply for admission. The people of a proposed state should want to be a state. This is particularly important for Puerto Rico, where there has long been mixed opinion about statehood, but it would also cover, let's say, California lawmakers trying to make a L.A. County, for instance, a state against the will of the people of L.A. County. And number 4, which is also not constitutionally required, is a question of minimum size. There is certainly precedent for new states to be less populous than any existing state. Alaska was the smallest state when it was admitted. So was Nevada. Is American Samoa, for instance, where the population is just 54,000, big enough to be a state? I don't know. Good question. But since neither D.C. nor Puerto Rico would be the smallest state if they were admitted, there's no question that they are big enough to be states. If Wyoming and Vermont can be states, then D.C. can be a state. So there's your formula and limiting principles. If some city or county or group of counties wants to be a state and they have a population larger than at least one existing state, and the state or states that they're currently a part of want them to be a state, and they're willing and able to draft themselves a state constitution, and 2 chambers of Congress will vote to make them a state, and a president will sign that bill, that's a lot of hurdles, right? Then they get to be a state. Sorry, that's cleared all the possible tests we can think of. If you think this is a slippery slope, then it's one we've had for 200 plus years, and that's not all that slippery. That's a lot of hurdles there. I don't actually think that there are all that many other places that would pass this formula, but maybe there are, and if so, bring it on, he says. He's open to it, and I guess we should be too. If you don't want Congress to admit those states, vote for a new Congress. If you don't like the process in the Constitution, amend the Constitution. But enough already, he says, with the Chicken Little stuff, he uses a different word there, about the unprecedented nature of any of this. It's super well precedented. It's the system the sainted founders created. The only part you can't blame on them is what the F to do with the 23rd Amendment. Interesting, and now you can all go look and read the 23rd Amendment and see whether you like it or not. I thought that was an interesting thing, not yet getting a lot of coverage. We're going to have to talk about Puerto Rico and D.C. statehood in a new Biden administration, so just putting you on notice there and giving you some background. Even though he comes from a free markets think tank, I guess feels like he has his head screwed on straight, so I was glad that he pitched that one in. All right. The rest of the week is ahead of us, plus, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. I bet he'll give a lot more attention to the stories you thought you'd hear more about on today's show. But, hey, if not, we'll cover them the rest of the week, and so will he, I'm sure. Let's see what he's got on tap for us here. Details about Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis remain murky. Good, I'm glad he's covering that one. But he did declare himself immune with no evidence, and you'll all get the free drug that did it for him, too. No doubt, within days, delivered to your doorstep, right? More after this.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning
with David Waldman.
Let's jump internationally here. Dozens of unidentified assailants attacked a Paris suburb police station with metal bars and incendiary fireworks as mortar rounds. Wow, the third such attack on this suburb police station in 2 years. Let's find out what that's all about by staying tuned to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.